Good morning. It's Thursday, July the 2nd, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. I created this podcast to reform conservatism. My podcast is short, approximately 5 to 10 minutes long, because shorter podcasts are easier to download and listen to. I've been listening to conservative talk radio since 1989. I've grown up in a socialist household and have learned the tricks of socialism. My podcast is made available through Spreaker and can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. Today, what can I do? Quote of the day, positive news, and integration versus diversity. All that when I come back. Thank you. Thank you. What can I do? Say no. Be prepared. Be confident. Play it straight. Be literal. Be intellectual. Have the courage of your convictions. Mind your own business. Think. Criticize. Trust yourself. Be realistic. Be modern. And stand your ground. Next up, quote of the day. Thank you. The quote of the day comes from dailyscripture.net. Lord Jesus, through your merciful love and forgiveness, you bring healing and restoration to body, mind, and soul. May your healing power and love touch every area of my life, my innermost thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and memories. Pardon my offenses and transform me in the power of your Holy Spirit, that I may walk confidently in your truth and goodness. Up next, good news. Thank you. From The Guardian, quote, U.S. unemployment rate falls to 11.1%, with 4.8 million workers hired in June. Trump hailed June's jobs report as a sign that his administration is doing a grand job. He also cheered the recent recovery in the stock market. Trump said, quote, the only thing that can kill it is a bad president who wants to raise taxes. Your stock market will go down to nothing. This is not luck. It is talent. Unquote. Coming up next, integration versus diversity. Thank you. I'm going to read two short excerpts from two books. The first one that I'm going to be reading is called Disintegration, and is written by Eugene Robinson. And this excerpt is titled, Black America Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It was one of those only in Washington affairs, a glittering A-list dinner in a stately mansion near Embassy Row. The hosts were one of the capital's leading power couples. The husband, a wealthy attorney who famously served as a consigliere and golfing partner to presidents. The wife, a social doyenne who sat on all the right committees and boards. The guest list included enough bold-faced names to fill the Washington Post's reliable source gossip column for a solid week. Most of the furniture had been cleared away to let people circulate, but the elegant rooms were so thick with status, ego, and ambition that it was hard to move. Officially, the dinner was to honor an aging lion of American business, the retired chief executive of the world's biggest media and entertainment company. Owing to recent events, however, the distinguished mogul was eclipsed at his own party. An elegant businesswoman from Chicago, a stranger to most of the other guests, suddenly had become one of the capital's most important power brokers. And this exclusive soiree was serving as her unofficial debut in Washington society. The bold-faced names feigned nonchalance, but were desperate to meet her. Eyes followed the woman's every move, ears strained to catch her every word. She pretended not to mind being stalked from room to room by eager supplicants and would-be best friends. As the evening went on, it became apparent that while the other guests were taking her measure, she was systematically taking theirs. To every beaming, glad-handing, air-kissing approach, she responded with the Mona Lisa smile of a woman not to be taken lightly. Others there that night included a well-connected lawyer who would soon be nominated to fill a key cabinet post, the chief executive of one of the nation's leading cable television networks, the former chief executive of the mortgage industry's biggest firm, a gaggle of high-powered lawyers, a pride of investment bankers, a flight of social butterflies, and a chattering of well-known cable television pundits, slightly hoarse and completely exhausted after spending a full year in more or less continuous yakety-yak about the presidential race. By any measure, it was a top-shelf crowd. On any given night, of course, some gathering of the great and the good in Washington ranks above all others by virtue of exclusivity, glamour, or the number of Secret Service SUVs parked outside. What makes this one worth noting is that all the luminaries I have described are black. The affair was held at the home of Vernon Jordan, the smooth, handsome, charismatic confidant of Democratic presidents, and his wife, Anne, an emeritus trustee of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and a reliable presence at every significant social event in town. Known for his impeccable political instincts, Jordan had made the rare mistake of backing the wrong candidate in the 2008 primaries, his friend Hillary Clinton. There are no grudges in Vernon's world, however. Barely a week after the election, he was already skillfully renewing his ties with the Obama crowd. The nominal guest of honor was Richard Parsons, the former CEO of Time Warner Incorporated. Months earlier, he had relinquished his corner office on Columbus Circle to tend the Tuscan vineyard that friends said was the favorite of his residences. The woman who stole the show was Valerie Jarrett, one of Obama's best friends and most trusted advisors. A powerful figure in the Chicago business community, Jarrett was unknown in Washington until Obama made his out-of-nowhere run to capture the Democratic nomination and then the presidency. Suddenly, she was the most talked-about and sought-after woman in town. Everyone understood that she would be sitting on the mother lode of the capital's rarest and most precious asset, access to the President of the United States. Others sidling up to the buffet included Eric Holder, soon to be nominated as the nation's first black attorney general, and his wife, Sharon Malone, a prominent obstetrician. Deborah Lee, the long-term chief of Black Entertainment Television, and one of the most powerful women in the entertainment industry. Franklin Raines, the former CEO of Fannie Mae, a central and controversial figure in the financial crisis that had begun to roil markets around the globe, and cable news regulars Donna Brazile and Soledad O'Brien from CNN, Juan Williams from Fox News Channel, and, well, me from MSNBC. All of us having talked so much during the long campaign that we were sick of hearing our own voices. The glittering scene wasn't at all what most people have in mind when they talk about Black America. This is one reason why so much of what people say about Black America makes so little sense. The fact is that asking what something called Black America thinks, feels, or wants makes as much sense as commissioning a new Gallup poll of the Ottoman Empire. Black America, as we know it, is history. There was a time when there were agreed-upon black leaders, when there was a clear black agenda, when we could talk confidently about the state of Black America. But not anymore. Not after decades of desegregation, affirmative action, and urban decay. Not after globalization decimated the working class and trickle-down economics sorted the nation into winners and losers. Not after the biggest wave of black immigration from Africa and the Caribbean since slavery. Not after most people cease to notice, much less care, when a black man and a white woman walk down the street hand in hand. These are among the forces and trends that have the unintended consequence of tearing black America to pieces. Ever wonder why black elected officials spend so much time talking about the purely symbolic issues like an official apology for slavery, or why they never miss the chance to denounce a racist outburst from a rehab-bound celebrity? It's because symbolism, history, and old-fashioned racism are about the only things they can be sure their African-American constituents still have in common. Barack Obama's stunning election as the first African-American president seemed to come out of nowhere, but it was the result of a transformation that has been unfolding for decades. With implications both hopeful and dispiriting, black America has undergone a process of disintegration. Disintegration isn't something black America likes to talk about, but it's right there, documented in census data, economic reports, housing patterns, and a wealth of other evidence just begging for honest analysis. And it's right there in our daily lives if we allow ourselves to notice. Instead of one black America, now there are four. A mainstream middle-class majority with a full ownership stake in American society. A large, abandoned minority with less hope of escaping poverty and dysfunction than at any time since Reconstruction's crushing end. A small transcendent elite with such enormous wealth, power, and influence that even white folks have to genuflect. Two newly emergent groups, individuals of mixed race heritage and communities of recent black immigrants, that make us wonder what black is even supposed to mean. These four black Americas are increasingly distinct, separated by demography, geography, and psychology. They have different profiles, different mindsets, different hopes, fears, and dreams. There are times and places when we all still come back together, on the increasingly rare occasions when we feel lumped together, defined, and threatened solely on the basis of skin color, usually involving some high-profile instance of bald-faced discrimination or injustice, and in venues like urban or black-oriented radio, which serves as a kind of speed of light grapevine. More and more, however, we lead separate lives. And where these distinct nations rub against one another, there are sparks. The mainstream tend to doubt the authenticity of the emergent, but they're usually too polite or too politically correct to say so out loud. The abandoned accuse the emergent, the immigrant segment at least, of moving into abandoned neighborhoods and using the locals as mere stepping stones. The immigrant emergent, with their intact families and long-range mindset, ridicule the abandoned for being their own worst enemies. The mainstream bemoan the plight of the abandoned, but express their deep concern from a distance. The transcendent, to steal the old line about Boston society, speak only to God. They are idolized by the mainstream and the emergent for the obstacles they have overcome, and by the abandoned for the shiny things they own. Mainstream, emergent, and transcendent all lock their car doors when they drive through an abandoned neighborhood. They think the abandoned don't hear the disrespectful thunk of the locks. They're wrong. How did this breakup happen? It's overly simplistic to draw a straight line from "we shall overcome" to "get rich or die trying," but that's the general trajectory. 40 years ago, after major cities from coast to coast had gone up in flames, black equaled poor. Roughly 6 in 10 black Americans were barely a step ahead of the bill collector, with fully 40% of the total living in the abject penury that the Census Bureau officially labels poverty, and another 20% earning a bit more, but still basically poor. Over the next 3 decades, as civil rights laws banned discrimination in education, housing, and employment, and as affirmative action offered life-changing opportunities to those prepared to take advantage, millions of black households clawed their way into the mainstream, and the black poverty rate fell steadily year after year. By the 90s, it was down to 25%, and then the needle got stuck. Today, roughly 1/4 of black Americans, the abandoned, remain in poverty. And the poorest of these poor folks are actually losing ground. Those who made it into the mainstream, however, have continued their rise. In 1967, only 1 black household in 10 made $50,000 a year. Now, 3 of every 10 black families earn at least that much. More strikingly, 4 decades ago, not even 2 black households in 100 earned the equivalent of more than $100,000 a year. Now, almost 1 black household in 10 has crossed that threshold to the upper middle class, joining George and Louise Jefferson in that deluxe apartment in the sky. Perhaps, or living down the street from the Huxtables' handsomely appointed brownstone. All told, the 4 black Americas control an estimated $800 billion in purchasing power, roughly the GDP of the 13th richest nation on earth. Most of that money is made and spent by the mainstream. Here's another way to look at it. 40 years ago, if you'd found yourself among a representative all-black crowd, you could assume that nearly half the people around you are poor, poorly educated, and underemployed. Today, if you found yourself at a representative gathering of black adults, 4 out of 5 would be solidly middle class. And again, that is from the book by Eugene Robinson that is called Disintegration. So let me get to the other book here that I'm going to read for him, which is called Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness by Touré. Let's see, what it means to be black now. Let's see if we can find with a foreword by Michael Eric Dyson, a New York Times and Washington Post notable book. Let's see, there we go. Oh, I see, okay. Let's see. Maybe I'm not going to get to anything here. Who's afraid of post-blackness? Boy, just all the preliminary stuff just goes on and on. Oh, well, here's a dedication that's interesting. Dedicated to everyone who has ever made to feel not black enough. Whatever that means. And now some more credits, an author's note. Let's see what we got here. I'm going to have to let this go for right now because I can't find the quotes that I'm looking for. So what I will do, though, is go on to the next one, which is the 70s, which I was reading from yesterday. And the 70s, this part of the 70s, it started with Nixon, and now it's on to race relations in the United States and how right around the civil rights era in 1965, then it was the idea of the civil rights movement was integration. It was to get everybody to live together, work together, go to school together, etc. And that in the midst of this, there emerged a movement to separate from each other, that every ethnicity should have its own identity and decide what that identity is going to be, and then go out and be about promoting that ethnic identity in terms of culture. So, let's see where we at here. A third, however, ruling, and this is about busing, so we're picking it up. We left it off when they're talking about busing. Third ruling, however, Milliken v. Bradley established the limits for forced busing. In a contentious 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court struck down a lower court's plan to bus students between overwhelmingly black Detroit and neighboring white suburbs. Outlying communities, Chief Justice Berger asserted, must not be held responsible for the problems of the city they surrounded. Milliken spared the suburbs the agonies of busing, hastened white flight beyond the city limits, and made it possible for those with means to abandon any commitment to city schools or to education for their less advantaged neighbors. The nation's struggling city dwellers, black and white, Latino, and Asian American, would bear the brunt of the struggle for integration and the agonies of busing. Boston dramatized the nation's anguish. In 1974, a federal judge ordered mandatory busing to desegregate the city's schools, sparking bitter protests and violent outbursts in classrooms and schoolyards. Armed riot police patrolled South Boston and Charleston, white neighborhoods that greeted black children with derisive signs taunting, "We don't want any N-words in our school," and "M-word, get out of our neighborhood." The nation's cradle of liberty, the city that begot the abolitionists and helped educate Martin Luther King, became the home of the bean, the cod, and the bigot. In April 1976, as Boston prepared to celebrate the nation's bicentennial, anti-busing protesters attacked Ted Landsmark, a Yale-educated black lawyer and architect, as he rushed across City Hall Plaza to a meeting. A stunning Boston Herald photograph broadcast the grisly scene to a horrified world. White boys trying to impale a black man with the American flag. Frustration, disappointment, and feelings of betrayal increasingly gripped black America. Early in the decade, an overwhelmingly majority of African Americans told pollsters that they wanted to live in integrated neighborhoods and send their children to racially mixed schools. By the end of the 70s, alienation had prevailed. By more than a 2-to-1 majority surveyed, African Americans declared that they felt closer to black people in Africa than white people in America. African Americans had lost faith in the responsiveness of American institutions, in the possibility of redressing grievances through the normal channels in American society. It appeared that the civil rights movement had reached the limits of its achievements. Profound disillusionment developed, and withdrawal from frustrating, seemingly useless public discourse quickly followed. And I'm going to leave it right there, and we'll pick up with the collapse of the integrationist ideal, and this is going to go into exactly when integration and assimilation and diversity split. Back in a minute. Who is a true conservative? He's the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He's the person that understands that cultural conservatism is more important than political conservatism. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He expresses what he knows and does so with certainty. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He's consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American, and he's better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that. If you don't know with every fiber of your being that being true conservative is best, then you're wasting your time. And that brings me to the end of another episode of The Drill. Remember, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and always ask yourself, what is real? How do I know? What do I do about it? I'm Ron, and that's The Drill.